hours, 5 hours in Afghanistan. Come on. You're surrounded by peacekeepers in this room. Look at the lawgivers. They're not warriors. They're people that tried to make peace. You're not going to win the war in Afghanistan militarily. You're going to win it through peace.
Gentleman's time has expired. All time in opposition has expired. Gentleman from Minnesota.
Mr. Chairman, everybody wants peace, I above all people, but the Department of Defense, and we have plenty of agencies within the federal government that will go ahead and search for peace. We do not need another program to do it, but we just cannot afford. And with that, sir, I would like to urge my colleagues to support this amendment. And I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back his time. Question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Minnesota. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. What purpose does the gentleman from Washington seek recognition?
On that, I would ask for a recorded vote.
Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Minnesota will be postponed. For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent that the debate for consideration of amendment number 55 be expanded by 10 minutes and that such time shall be equally divided and controlled by the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. McGovern, and myself.
Without objection, so ordered.
Okay. Okay. For what purpose does the gentleman from Massachusetts rise?
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk made in order under the rule.
Clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 55, printed in House Report number 112-88, offered by Mr. McGovern of Massachusetts.
Pursuant to House Resolution 276, the gentleman from Massachusetts and Mr. McGovern, and the gentleman from California and Mr. McKeon, by previous order of the House, will each control 10 minutes. And the chair recognizes the gentleman from Massachusetts.
Mr. Chairman, I yield myself 2 minutes.
Gentleman's recognized.
Mr. Chairman, too many people have died in Afghanistan. Since January, I have attended 3 funerals in my district alone of young men who have sacrificed their lives there. Tens of thousands more have been wounded, and the suicide rate among our veterans from Afghanistan and Iraq is soaring. There is no clear mission. The Karzai government is corrupt. We continue to borrow money to pay for this war. We need to rethink what we're doing in Afghanistan. It's time to define the plan to bring our uniformed men and women home to their families and to their communities where they belong. Mr. Chairman, this is the longest war in our nation's history. It's no longer about al-Qaeda. I've met with our troops in Afghanistan. I've met with them after they've come home. They're incredible. Politicians put them into harm's way, and we now have an obligation to get them safely home. President Obama has promised a drawdown of U.S. troops in July. Now we hear that might just be a token drawdown. This amendment, Mr. Chairman, and the vote on this amendment can send the President a clear signal of support for a meaningful drawdown of troops. Help him do what the American people want him to do, bring our troops home and invest in America. We need to safeguard our national security. We all agree with that. But many of our greatest problems aren't halfway around the world, they're halfway down the block. And rather than nation building in Afghanistan, we need to do some more nation building right here in the United States. Mr. Chairman, this is not a partisan issue. It's about doing what's right for our troops and for the nation. If you have ever once thought that we need to do something different in Afghanistan, that it's time to rethink our policy, that we need to bring our troops home to their loved ones, then this is the amendment that you need to support. I ask my colleagues to vote for this amendment, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. His time has expired. The gentleman from California, 10 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I yield 2 minutes to my friend and colleague, the gentleman from Colorado, Mr. Kaufman.
Gentleman from Colorado.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise in opposition to the McGovern amendment. I would certainly agree that we have gone beyond our security objectives in Afghanistan by building the economy that they never had at U.S. taxpayers' expense, by trying to restructure their society and giving them a government that doesn't reflect the political culture of the country. But at that same time, we have legitimate security objectives in Afghanistan to keep the Taliban out, to keep from taking over the country, to keep al-Qaeda out, and to have a permissive environment in which to conduct strikes into Pakistan to targets such as Osama bin Laden or al-Qaeda and Taliban leaders as they present themselves. But this amendment speaks to an expeditious withdrawal of U.S. forces from Afghanistan at a time when we are very far down the path of a current strategy for which the President says that we will already reduce our footprint in Afghanistan this summer, as well as shift operational control to Afghan security forces by 2014. This would pull the rug out under that entire strategy, and I would urge a no vote from my colleagues.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Massachusetts.
Mr. Chairman, I'm very proud now to yield to the co-sponsor of this amendment, Mr. Jones of North Carolina.
For how long?
2 minutes.
2 minutes. Gentleman's recognized.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. On May the 9th of this year, in an article in the Wall Street Journal, the title is Mission Accomplished. The article states al-Qaeda is no longer based there in Afghanistan, and the Taliban must be beaten by Afghans themselves. This is why it is the right time to support the McGovern Amendment. It's a reasonable, balanced plan to bring our troops home from Afghanistan. Mr. Speaker, 2 weeks ago, Lieutenant Colonel Benjamin Palmer and Sergeant Kevin Baldiff, 2 Marines from my district, were shot and murdered by an Afghan officer while trying to train the Afghans. Here are these 2 great men, fathers, trying to train the Afghans, and somebody within the training area kills them, murders them. Yes, let's keep staying there. It's all worthwhile. Mr. Speaker, the reason this amendment is so important is because Secretary Gates, back in February on the Armed Services Committee, made this statement. I'm going to paraphrase it. That is why we believe that beginning in 2015, the United States can, with minimal risk, begin reducing active duty in strength. 2015, to quote the retired Marine Corps general that I respect so much, and I didn't serve in the military, and I quote him, "What do we say to the mother and father, the wife of the last Marine or soldier killed to support a corrupt government and a corrupt leader?" The American people are tired and fed up. But let me say, more importantly than the American people are our military. They are tired and fed up. And the wife of this sergeant who was murdered trying to train the Afghans, he had emailed her the day before. And I read the email. "I don't trust them. I don't trust them for anything, not for anything at all." And he died the next day, leaving 2 little girls. God bless our men and women in uniform and support the McGovern Amendment. Are you back?
Gentleman from California.
Mr. Chairman, the last time I was in Afghanistan, a little over a month ago, I had a chance to visit with our Marines and troopers, and they were so animated about their mission, so filled with the idea that they were able to fight for freedom. They told me the thing that the people are asking is, when are you leaving now? They need to have the understanding that we're there to finish the mission, to be successful in the mission. At this time, I yield 2 minutes to my friend and colleague, the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Conroy.
Gentleman from Texas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for yielding the time. Thank you, Chairman, for having me. I have just recently gotten back from Afghanistan, and it is hard doing what we're trying to get done there. But we are the narrative in place today is better than at any point in time since I've been going to Afghanistan. I've been going since 2005. I visited the Arghandab Valley. I visited Marja, visited in Helmand Province, Kandahar Province, and seen with my own eyes the successes that last year's very difficult work done by the Marine Corps, done by the Army, has done in pushing the Taliban out of the settled areas and back into the desert and protecting the citizens of Afghanistan to give them the breathing space they need to take over for themselves. The work being done to establish the Afghan local police, that third layer of defense and security by the Afghans, is in place and is working. The Special Forces teams that are co-located with those Afghan local police, particularly in the Arghandab Valley, have settled that, and the Taliban has not come back this fighting season as they expected them to do. We have hard work to do. I understand the emotions. I understand the heartfelt tug that the previous speaker had said, brought to us, Mr. Speaker, but it's hard not to listen to that and not make decisions, but decisions can't be made just simply on those emotions. We cannot separate what's going on in Afghanistan with Pakistan. We have to look at the entire package of that part of the world and our national security interests there, which are linked inextricably together with the interest in Afghanistan and Pakistan. So I have respectfully rise to respectfully disagree with my colleagues on this amendment. There are better ways to elicit these kind of forward-looking plans than this amendment, and I ask my fellow colleagues to vote against the McGovern amendment. Now I yield back.
Gentleman from Massachusetts.
Mr. Chairman, now I'm proud to yield 2 minutes to the ranking Democrat on the Armed Services Committee, Mr. Smith.
Gentleman from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise in strong support of the McGovern amendment because I believe it puts us on the best path to successfully completing our mission in Afghanistan. I think it is very reasoned and very well thought out. One of the keys to successfully completing this mission is to hand over responsibility to the Afghan people for their security and for their government. The McGovern amendment does not say pull all the troops out now at the end of the month or at the end of the year. It says we must put in place a plan for drawing down so we can shift that responsibility. And I'll also agree with some of my colleagues who oppose the amendment. I think our men and women in the armed forces in the last 6 months to a year have made enormous progress in Afghanistan. The surge of troops that President Obama called for has made a big difference, has put us in a better position to be successful in Afghanistan. But the genius of the McGovern amendment is to recognize that there is also a trap in that. Because if we stay too long, the Afghan government becomes dependent upon us in a way that stops them from being independent. Our goal, our mission in Afghanistan is clear, despite many who say it isn't. We want a government in Afghanistan that can stand so that the Taliban and al-Qaeda are not able to come back into that country. That is our goal. We're making progress towards it. But we will not complete that mission until the responsibility for that is turned over to the Afghan people. To do that, we need a plan, and we need to recognize that that is the goal. That's why the McGovern amendment calls for that plan, calls for us to step up negotiations with folks on the other side between the Afghan government and some of the Taliban leaders, which have been bearing fruit of late, so that we can begin that transition and bring our troops home and recognize the success that they've had. A permanent or even lengthy occupation of a Muslim nation with U.S. troops is not going to work. We need a plan to properly disengage. That is how we will achieve what I think we all agree is the mission in Afghanistan. So I urge support from the McGovern amendment. I thank him for bringing it. I think we need a plan for making that transition so that we can have the success that we all want in Afghanistan.
Gentleman from California.
Mr. Chairman, I yield 2 minutes to my friend and colleague, the chairman of the Subcommittee on Readiness, the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Forbes.
Gentleman from Virginia.
Chairman, I thank the gentleman for yielding, and we all know this, that every great champion knows that he hears from the sideline those voices who are constantly screaming for him to quit. Those voices who tell him the race is just too tough, the finish line just too far away, just quit. And Mr. Chairman, when I listen to what I'm hearing today and I realize that both sides now in Afghanistan are working for a 2014 timetable, they're both serious about, they're both pursuing, I think who would love this amendment? Well, I've heard a lot about our troops, but I just got back last week and I talked to a lot of troops across Afghanistan, and I will tell you, I don't think there was a one of them that I talked to that would have supported this amendment. The second thing is I talked to young individuals who were elected to the parliament in Afghanistan who were talking about concepts of freedom for the first time and transparency, and who were working to change that government in Afghanistan. And not one of those individuals that I spoke to would have supported this amendment. And I saw young children for the first time in Afghanistan beginning to flood into schools every day. Not one of them would have looked and supported this amendment. I talked to Afghan soldiers who were being trained and who realized the importance they had of reaching that 2014 time period and taking over the reins there. Not one of them would have supported this amendment, but I'll tell you who would have. The Taliban and al-Qaeda would love any glimpse of hope that we're going to get out there before we get the job done. And, Mr. Chairman, I want to finish with this. I heard my friend from North Carolina talk about the price tag we pay. Let there be no question that we know the price tag we pay, that our men and women fighting over there know the price tag they are paying. But they also know that our failure to win in Afghanistan and meet the goals we have is a far greater price tag for us to pay. That's why we should defeat this amendment. And, Mr. Chairman, with that, I yield back.
Gentleman from Massachusetts.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to yield 3 minutes to the distinguished minority whip, the gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Hoyer.
Gentleman from Maryland.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. I asked the previous speaker to go in his community to all those same institutions and see what they say. I rise in support of this amendment as one who has supported this effort for all 10 years that we have been at it. In 2001, in response to the attacks of 9/11, the United States began a war in Afghanistan that targeted Osama bin Laden, al-Qaeda, and the Taliban, which provided bin Laden with sanctuary and aid. I supported that effort. We have been pursuing this conflict for nearly a decade now. The death of Osama bin Laden was a landmark moment in our ongoing struggle to disrupt, dismantle, and defeat the terrorist networks that intend to do Americans harm. And that struggle has not ended with bin Laden's death. But his death is a moment for reflection on that struggle and how we can best equip ourselves to win it. Many of the terrorists against which we are fighting are no longer located in Afghanistan, but are in disparate locations, from Yemen to Somalia to Southeast Asia, and bin Laden was found in Pakistan. I support this amendment because it focuses upon adjusting to a world of changing threats. It is essential that we fight the smartest war possible against terrorists. But it is fair to ask how a massive troop presence in Afghanistan continues to help us accomplish that goal. We must plan to transfer responsibility for security in Afghanistan to the Afghan people and government after 10 years' presence there. And it's important to make an assessment of how that best can be done. That's what the McGovern Amendment does. Therefore, this amendment requires a national intelligence estimate of al-Qaeda's current leadership, locations, and capabilities. It requires the President to convey to Congress how he intends to meet the goal he stated in December 2009 of transitioning for lead security responsibility to the Afghan people, where it belongs. It also asks the President to clarify plans for advancing a political solution in Afghanistan, which all of our military leaders have said that is the only ultimate solution. Finally, nothing in this amendment limits or prohibits the President's authority to attack al-Qaeda or gather or share intelligence, nor does it require the administration to modify its military strategy, as it should not. This amendment, however, helps to meet our shared goal of defeating terrorists who wish us harm. I have no doubt that President Obama and every member of this House believes that their very first duty is to keep our nation safe. We must constantly challenge one another and our nation to fight smarter and harder to ensure victory in this broader struggle. So I rise in support of this amendment and urge its adoption and yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman from California.
Mr. Chairman, I yield 2 minutes to my friend and colleague, the Chairman of the Oversight and Investigation Subcommittee of the Armed Services Committee, the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Whitman.
Gentleman from Virginia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I, too, was recently in Afghanistan there visiting our troops, visiting the folks on the ground there, getting briefings about what's going on. This amendment assumes that they're sitting there twiddling their thumbs saying, you know something, we really want to stay here for a long period of time. Folks, that is not the case. They are doing everything they can as quickly as they can. I was there where they were training Afghans to be able to take over control of that country. While I was there, they turned over control of 7 regions in that country. To somehow believe that nothing is going on, that we need to accelerate, is just ludicrous. They are going as fast as they can, but they're going at a rate to assure that we're going to be there and be there successfully in helping the Afghan government do what they need to do to make sure they assume control of the country and that they can maintain control and can make sure that they are there to defeat the Taliban. That's what the focus is. That's what this mission is, and they are there doing that in a tremendous way. Somehow saying that we're going to go ahead and accelerate this, create artificial time frames without being aware of what's going on the ground, and saying somehow our military leaders aren't doing things as quickly and as efficiently as they should, I think denies the reality of what they are doing, which is going as quickly as they can and doing a fantastic job of doing that. Also, if you look at the requirements of the bill about determining time frames for negotiations, to me, requiring time frames on negotiations creates weakness in negotiations. I think you ought to make sure that it's the back and forth with the Taliban and the Afghan government that determines where the negotiations are going, not artificial time frames. I think that creates, unfortunately, an imbalance in those deliberations, getting to what I believe is a satisfactory completion to the conflict there, but also to having an outcome that's satisfactory to the country, not just in the short term, but in the long term. So I believe strongly that this bill, this amendment, is not what we need to be doing there. Our effort needs to be left in the hands of our military leaders there, and they are going as quickly as they can in a responsible way. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Time's expired. Gentleman from Massachusetts.
I'd like to inquire from the gentleman, the chairman, how many more speakers he has. We have one remaining speaker. Okay. Mr. Speaker, for the sake of our troops and our country, I urge support of this amendment. I yield the remaining 1 minute to the Minority Leader, Ms. Pelosi.
Gentlelady from California.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I thank the gentleman for yielding and thank him for his leadership, working with Congressman Walter Jones on this bipartisan amendment which has been brought to the floor. They have worked, again, in a bipartisan way, in a patriotic way, to ensure that U.S. troops are brought home from Afghanistan safely and expeditiously. Listening to the debate, it's interesting because I don't know that we're that far off because we all want to ensure the national security of our country. We all respect our men and women in uniform and the job that they are doing to keep us the land of the free and the home of the brave. We respect them when they come home as our veterans. But we have to know that involvement of nearly 10 years has serious consequences to our country. I have told the President of Afghanistan on my recent visit this spring that each time I go there I say the American people are growing tired of war. We're weary of war. We went into Afghanistan in the fall of 2001. For about 7 years, there was no plan. There was no plan on how we would execute what we went to do and how we would leave. When President Obama became president, many of us who were eager for us to bring our troops home gave him a chance to put forth a plan, which he did, which calls for a drawdown of troops this July 2011 and terminating in drawing down more completely 2014. President Obama himself has said earlier this month, I've already made a commitment that starting in July of this year we are drawing down troops and we are transitioning. We are training Afghan forces so they can start securing their own country. The Afghans can secure their own country. The President went on to say, we don't need to have a perpetual footprint of the size we have now. And so therefore, I think it's really important for us to know what this amendment does that I think reflects the mood of the American people. Within 60 days of enactment, a plan and time frame for the accelerated transition of military and security forces to the government of Afghanistan. In 60 days, we're going to see a plan. Within 60 days of enactment, a plan and time frame for negotiations leading to a political solution and reconciliation in Afghanistan. A plan within 60 days. Within 90 days of enactment, a national intelligence estimate on leadership, location, and capabilities of al-Qaeda and affiliated networks and cells. Who can be against that? Who can be against that? We're talking about 60 days a plan, 60 days a plan, 60 days a negotiation. I appreciate the efforts that this amendment as it underscores the importance of having a plan and a time frame for a transition of responsibility, but that's all negotiated, a transition of responsibility for security and stability to the Afghans so that we can bring our troops home. The national intelligence estimate on al-Qaeda that is called for in the plan will also help ensure our policymakers that they have updated information on the threat posed by al-Qaeda and affiliates who remain a threat even following the death of Osama bin Laden. Careful intelligence analysis is essential to keeping the American people safe. So as I salute our men and women in uniform, I also want to salute our men and women in the intelligence community who are an important part of keeping the American people safe, and I commend them and CIA Director Panetta for his leadership in the capture of Osama bin Laden. But back to this specific point of this amendment. I've gone there year after year after year, never thinking that we would be engaged in the longest war in America's history. First 7 years, not even a plan. And now the President has put into motion how we make judgments about how we stay and how we leave. If you visit the women in Afghanistan, if you visit the women in Afghanistan, that many women in the Congress have done, and some of our male colleagues as well, they will tell you, whether you're talking about educated women in Kabul, but really more relevant to me, poor, poor women in the provinces. I visited a group of women in the province of Zabul. I visited a number of provinces and spoken to the women there. And the women there say, we really want to educate our daughters, we want to have access to health care clinics and the rest, but we can't have that until we have security, and we can't have security until we end corruption. So there are many things going on in Afghanistan that must change. And there will be a better chance of their changing if we make an investment in the civilian side of this transition, whether it's diplomacy, whether it's part of the construction. They tell me not to say reconstruction because not much was there before. Construction there, whether it's building schools. We visited little girls in school in different parts of Afghanistan. It's very encouraging. Our troops know that we have to leave, that we have to transition out. But as I told President Karzai also, we didn't come here and we're not staying here 10 years so that when we leave, women return to the subjugated position they were in under the Taliban. So the answer to that is women must be at the table when you have the negotiations for reconciliation of the leadership of the Taliban, reintegration of rank-and-file members of the Taliban as we move toward more stability in Afghanistan. Women must play a role. Women in America, women throughout the world care about how this all turns out there. So here we are, almost 10 years later, in a situation where we just want to have some management of this issue. Let's have a plan for how the negotiations will take place. Let's have a plan after we see the national intelligence estimate based on what the al-Qaeda threat is. This is a very wise amendment. I thank Mr. McGovern and Mr. Jones for how they put it together, because it's very reasonable. It has a goal in sight. It has a reasonable approach as to how we get there. But make no mistake, in overwhelming numbers, the American people think we have done our job there in terms of helping the Afghan people. Our purpose there was to protect the American people. We can do both by focusing more on the civilian side of governance issues, on how Afghanistan is governed, on anti-corruption issues, and the initiatives that I have seen there on this recent trip are an improvement over the past by training the national security forces of Afghanistan, be it police or the military, so they can maintain their own security, and by diplomatically enlisting other countries in the region because they all have a vested interest in the stability of Afghanistan. But an open-ended, unending war there, which in the cost is, and there's nothing to compare to the cost of the loss of our young men and women. So that's first and foremost what our concern is. But also the cost in dollars, the cost in opportunity, the cost in military strength. This engagement in Afghanistan is not strengthening our military. So Americans are paying a big price there. We want to make sure we're getting a return on that investment, and time is a very important factor. It's time for our troops to come home. And I thank Mr. McGovern and Mr. Jones for their leadership, and yield back the balance of our time.
The gentleman from California.
Mr. Chairman, might I inquire as to the time remaining?
You have 2 1/4 minutes.
And their time is?
Their time is expired.
Mr. Chairman, at this time I yield the balance of my time to my friend and colleague, the Vice Chairman of the Armed Services Committee and Chairman of the Subcommittee on Emerging Threats and Capabilities, the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Thornberry.
Gentleman from Texas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It is always tempting to say we ought to have a plan, but I think the purpose of this amendment is clear. It's to drive us out of Afghanistan on an accelerated time frame without regard for the conditions on the ground. And that is not only a mistake in strategy and detrimental to our security interests, it actually increases the danger to our troops and to coalition troops as well. Timelines undermine their efforts. It discourages your friends because they know you're not going to be there very long. It encourages your enemies because that helps them plan their assault against you. And it ensures that anybody on the fence hedges their bets because they know that you're not going to be around for very long. And Mr. Chairman, it occurs to me at a time when our government is wanting President Karzai to make difficult decisions, it is not particularly helpful for the minority leader to go over there and tell him how tired we are. Is that persuasive? Does that help him make the tough decisions to end corruption and to stand up the Afghan police? Somehow, I don't think so. Mr. Chairman, I want our troops to come home as soon as they possibly can, too, but I do not want the considerable sacrifice of blood and treasure that they have expended to be thrown away because of political impatience. That was the exact concern that numerous servicemen voiced to me when I was there with Speaker Boehner last month. They worried that Washington would throw away the important progress they have fought and died for. Last Saturday, Mr. Chairman, in my district was a banquet to honor Armed Services Day. There were more than 1,200 veterans, people who are serving, people who have served, their families, and numerous Gold Star families were there. The theme of the night was persistence. And you could tell from those families that have suffered the most and from those veterans that they did not want to have their sacrifice squandered away because of some Washington political compromise. Mr. Chairman, I'd suggest we need to learn from them and be inspired from them and reject this amendment.
All time for debate on the McGovern amendment has expired. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Massachusetts. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. In the opinion of the Chair, the noes have it. Gentleman from Massachusetts.
And that I ask for a recorded vote.
Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Massachusetts will be postponed. For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, pursuant to H.Res. 276, I offer amendments en bloc.
Clerk will designate the amendments en bloc.
Amendments on block number 3, consisting of amendments number 70, 74, 85, 86, 87, 88, 90, 91, 92, 93, 94, 95, 97, 101, 102, 103, 104, 105, printed in House Report number 112-88, offered by Mr. McKeon of California.
Pursuant to House Resolution 276, gentleman from California, Mr. McKeon, and the gentleman from Washington, Mr. Smith, each will control 10 minutes, and the chair recognizes the gentleman from California.
Mr. Chairman, I urge the committee to adopt the amendments in block, all of which have been examined by both the majority and the minority. At this time, I yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Alaska for the purpose of a colloquy.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. I rise today to express my concerns about our strategic ports. First, I want to thank the chairman, the ranking member, Mr. Smith, and members of the Armed Services Committee for supporting an amendment that I offered with Mrs. Bardola that would direct specific study and analysis of critical infrastructure needs at our nation's DoD-designated strategic seaports. I think the chairman would agree that understanding and addressing vital infrastructure needs at our strategic seaports is of major importance.
I do agree that assessing and correcting infrastructure problems at the nation's strategic seaports, which are an integral part of our national defense readiness, is of vital importance.
I thank the gentleman. Since 1958, the strategic seaport programs has facilitated the movement of military forces securely through U.S. ports. Each strategic seaport has individual capabilities that provide the Department of Defense with the port facilities and services that are critical in maintaining the operational flexibility and redundancy needed to meet a wide range of national security missions and timelines. However, the existing infrastructure at many of the strategic ports may no longer be adequate to meet the needs of our military. The language being included in the bill will help us identify the infrastructure improvements necessary to ensure our strategic ports remain accessible to our military, as well as determine whether existing authorities and funding sources are adequate to facilitate the making necessary infrastructure improvement. This study is an important first step. I look forward to working with the Armed Services Committee on ways to improve our strategic ports to guarantee that they remain capable of supporting our military operational needs.
As the gentleman knows, this committee has had a long-standing interest in our strategic ports, and I'll be happy to work with the gentleman from Alaska and the gentlewoman from Guam to consider the appropriate measures to address the critical infrastructure needs of our strategic seaports.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Washington.
Reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise to claim. Well, you already gave me the time. Sorry. At this point, I'll yield 1 minute to the gentlelady from Texas, Ms. Jackson Lee.
Gentlelady from Texas.
I thank the ranking member. I rise to support the en bloc amendments and to add my understanding and support for the McGovern-Jones and a number of other members' amendment. Let me first make it clear that this is a bipartisan amendment, and there was a great deal of collaboration and sensitivity to formulating a structure that would be respectful of the men and women who serve us today. But I rise to support this amendment because I can clearly see the human and financial costs which have been so high. $10 billion a month, which in this climate where we're addressing franchise terrorism, where individuals can rise up and do harm to the United States at any time, it is time now to plan a time frame for accelerated transition for our troops to come home from Afghanistan, to find a political solution with diplomacy, to be able to deal with al-Qaeda in a manner that will allow...
Additional 30 seconds.
Ladies recognized.
To be able to reassess how al-Qaeda is now functioning with its titular head, its inspirational head, no longer, and whether or not they will seep and spread into other places where we have to address this question, and of course where the amendment does not limit existing authority on ongoing al-Qaeda efforts with sharing intelligence or changing military strategy, tactics, or operations on the ground in Afghanistan. Remember Pakistan, how we have to work with them and try to help the Pakistan people. This is an important amendment. I support the en bloc amendments, and I support the McGovern amendment. Let us find a way to bring our troops home. I yield back.
Gentleman from California.
Mr. Chairman, I yield 2 minutes to my friend and colleague, the gentleman from Colorado, Mr. Kaufman.
Gentleman from Colorado.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise today in support of H.R. 1540, the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2012. I would like to thank the Chairman and the Ranking Member for their leadership on this committee, and in particular their support for the issues I've been pursuing. Included in this in-block package are two amendments of mine which I wanted to speak on briefly. Amendment 48 requires the Secretary of Defense to submit a report to the Congress on the feasibility of recycling rare earth elements used by the Department. This amendment, along with the provision in the Chairman's remark requiring a rare earth inventory plan, are important steps in reconstituting the nation's ability to access a secure, reliable, and competitive market for rare earth products used to support our national security. I have been particularly troubled by reports from the Department of Defense indicating that they are not concerned about our nation's near total reliance on China for access to these critical materials. Last September's rare earth embargo of Japan by the Chinese should serve as an important reminder that this dependence leaves our military vulnerable to supply disruptions should a foreign nation choose to take advantage of its dominance in the market. Our nation does not need to accept this dependence. With ample reserves in the United States, including Alaska, Colorado, and California, we have the potential to meet our own demand for these materials, but steps must be taken in Congress to level the playing field in this market. This amendment will require the Department of Defense to examine the feasibility of recycling rare earth materials that are currently disposed of. This is not only good stewardship, it is an important part of a complete plan to reconstitute our domestic rare earth industry and to meet our nation's security needs. I've also introduced an amendment that will pave the way for meaningful reform to the Department of Defense Tuition Assistance Program. This is an excellent program that provides educational opportunities to our service members. When I was a young enlisted infantryman in the Army, I took advantage of this program.
Give the gentleman an additional minute.
The gentleman is recognized for another minute.
When I was a young enlisted infantryman in the United States Army, I took advantage of this program to begin my own college education, but it has room to be perfected. A change in cost sharing has caused funding for the tuition assistance program to increase from $157 million in FY 201 to $531 million in FY 2010. Cost per credit hour of distance education, for instance, has risen dramatically since 2001. The services have had to deny tuition assistance benefits to some service members because of the growing cost of this program. My amendment calls for a study from the Department of Defense on ways to reform this program, including reinstating the 25-75% cost sharing. I believe that with quote-unquote skin in the game, service members will have incentives for high academic performance, and that more service members will be eligible for tuition assistance benefits. I urge my colleagues to support H.R. 1540. I yield back.
Gentleman from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Conroy.
Gentleman from Virginia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I thank my friend. I particularly want to thank Chairman McKeon and Ranking Member Smith and their able staffs for their wonderful cooperation in putting together this en bloc set of amendments. I wanted to just highlight several with which I'm associated. Amendment 93, co-sponsored by Mr. Blumenauer, Mr. Hinchey, Mr. Welch, and Ms. Capps, will reduce fuel convoy deaths in Iraq and Afghanistan. Mr. Chairman, we have lost 3,000 lives trying to protect fuel convoys in those two countries. And so we can actually save money and save lives with this amendment. Amendment 91, co-sponsored by Mr. Platts of Pennsylvania, improves the Federal Acquisition Institute. This is legislation also introduced by our Republican friend in the U.S. Senate, Susan Collins, and has bipartisan support, making the federal government a lot more efficient and will not build a new bureaucracy or add expenses. Amendment 92, co-sponsored by Mr. Bill Bray of California, will actually try to systematize and make more effective the internship programs in the federal government so that we're actually taking advantage of those opportunities and making sure they also serve a better purpose for the interns who sign up for the federal government. Amendment number 90, co-sponsored by Mr. Kissel, directs that the Pentagon report to Congress on the estimated cost of expanding the Homeowners Assistance Program. A lot of our active duty military, when they're called up or transferred, find themselves in enormous distress given the housing crisis. This amendment will help them and their families by extending their ability to try to manage that situation. Mr. Chairman, I very much appreciate, as I said, the cooperation of the chairman and his staff and the ranking member and his staff, and I yield back now to Mr. Smith, the ranking minority member.
Gentleman from California.
Serve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Washington.
I yield 1 minute to the gentlelady from New York, Ms. Slaughter.
Gentlelady from New York.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the gentleman for yielding. And I want to read a sentence from a report that was recently released. It is something for us to think about. We are in uncharted territory here, says the Army Vice Chief of Staff. We have never fought for this long. This is the history of the Republic. We have never fought for this long with an all-volunteer force that's only 1% of the population. Mr. Speaker, we see what is the results of this war. There are tens of thousands of our young soldiers maimed with life-altering conditions, complete loss of limbs, devious head wounds that are going to change their life forever, many of them as young as 20 or 21 years old. Now, Osama bin Laden has been captured and dealt with. That was the reason for us going in the first place. Only Congress can stop this. We are such an open-ended, we talked here today about we can't go until the Afghans say we're ready. That may be 50 years from now, Mr. Speaker, and it's time that we really got serious about what we're doing here, not only to the young men and women who go. May I have an additional 30 seconds?
Yield the gentlelady an additional 30 seconds.
I see them in the airport every week. I see them going back. Some of them on the 4th deployment, and they beg me. They beg me to come down here and to try to get this to stop. They have literally said to me they will send me back until I am dead and I come home in a black box. How dare we do this? It is time. It is time for us to face up to the fact that what we could do there has been done and that we need a definite timetable as quickly as possible to stop this war in Afghanistan. I thank the gentleman for yielding.
Gentleman from California.
Continue to reserve.
Gentleman from Washington.
We reserve as well. I don't have any more speakers on this en bloc amendment, so we are prepared to yield back if you are. I yield back balance of our time.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from California.
I yield back the balance of my time. Encourage all the members to support the en bloc amendment.
Question is on the en bloc amendments offered by the gentleman from California, Mr. McKee, and those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The opinion of the Chair, the ayes have it. The ayes have it, and the amendment is agreed to. For what purpose does the gentleman from California rise?
Mr. Chairman, pursuant to H.Res. 276, I offer amendments en bloc.
The clerk will designate the amendments en bloc.
Amendments en bloc number 4, consisting of amendments number 106, 107, 108, 109, 112, 113, 114, 115, 116, 117, 118, 119, 120, 121, 122, 123, 124, 125, and 126, printed in House Report number 112-88, offered by Mr. McKeon of California.
Pursuant to House Resolution 276, the gentleman from California, Mr. McKeon, and the gentleman from Washington, Mr. Smith, will each control 10 minutes on the amendments en bloc, and the Chair recognizes the gentleman from California.
Mr. Chairman, I urge the committee to adopt the amendments en bloc, all of which have been examined by both the majority and the minority.
And the gentleman?
I reserve the balance of my time.
Reserves his time. Gentleman from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Moran.
Gentleman from Virginia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I support this en bloc amendment, but I'd like to speak on behalf of one of the amendments that's included in it and greatly thank the chairman and the ranking member for including it. This fall, 6,400 Department of Defense employees are scheduled to occupy an office complex less than 5 miles from the U.S. Capitol. It's known as the Mark Center. It's on U.S. Route 395 and Seminary Road. According to 5 separate transportation studies, including the Army's own Transportation Management Plan and a damning Department of Defense Inspector General report, this location was improperly chosen and inadequately designed to handle the traffic it will create. It will thus result in severe congestion on 395 and all of the roads surrounding the site. Now, the problem is that about 200,000 commuters use 395 every day. We estimate it will cause a 1 to 2 hour additional delay for those commuters. The National Academy of Sciences looked at it. They said that if this goes through in the fall, that it will compromise the military mission that is required on behalf of the Washington headquarters service people that would occupy the building, and it will cause severe damage to the surrounding, to the regional economy. What this amendment does is to simply limit the number of vehicles that can come to this site to no more than 1,000 until traffic mitigation measures are in place. Now, the Defense Department has finally reprogrammed $20 million. Governor McDonnell of Virginia has allocated $80 million for a ramp that would come off the HOV lanes onto the site. The Pentagon's money won't be in place for another couple years. Governor McDonnell's project will not be completed for 5 years. Now, what this does is to limit the number of spaces for the next year. That's substantial progress. It needs to be included on behalf of those 200,000 commuters. And again, I want to greatly thank the chairman and ranking member for including the amendment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman from California.
Continue to reserve.
Reserve. Gentleman from Washington.
Thank you. I yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Lipinski.
Gentleman from Illinois.
Mr. Chairman, I rise in support of these en bloc amendments. The Korean War is often referred to as a forgotten war, but the toll it took on those who served and the mark it left on America, American veterans, Korea, and the world is indelible. A group of dedicated individuals led by Korea veteran Dennis Healy have begun work on the Korean War National Museum to be located in Chicago. This amendment, which I introduced with my colleague from Illinois, Peter Roscom, supports increased efforts to educate and raise public awareness of the Korean War through the establishment of such a museum. This museum will preserve the legacy and history of the war, commemorate the sacrifices made by those who served, and celebrate the advances in freedom and democracy made by the Republic of Korea. The veterans of this important conflict deserve our recognition, honor, and appreciation. A national museum will ensure that what they accomplished will be remembered. I thank Chairman McKeon and Ranking Member Smith for supporting this amendment, and I yield back.
Amendment yields back. Gentleman from California.
Mr. Chairman, I yield this time 1 minute to my friend and colleague, the gentleman from Missouri, Mr. Lutkenmeyer.
The gentleman from Missouri.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm proud to rise today in support of an amendment that would allow for the review of service records of eligible Jewish Americans veterans from World War I. I want to thank Chairman McKeon and Ranking Member Smith, along with my colleagues who sponsored the legislation, for their support of this important issue. We owe much to the patriotic Americans who have worn and are wearing the uniforms of our armed forces. Our country has been blessed to have citizens who have selflessly volunteered to defend our nation and our freedom. Unfortunately, qualified soldiers have not been considered for the Medal of Honor, the highest military decoration awarded by our government, due to discrimination. In 2001, Congress passed the Leonard Kravitz Jewish War Veterans Act, which had broad bipartisan support. This important piece of legislation presented Jewish soldiers the opportunity to receive the Medal of Honor for their service in World War II. However, Jewish veterans of World War I face similar discrimination and yet have not been offered the opportunity to receive recognition for their service. Last Congress, this amendment was included as part of an en bloc group of amendments that was agreed to by the House by a vote of 416 to 1. We urge its adoption. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman from Washington.
I yield 2 minutes to the gentlelady from Texas, Ms. Jackson Lee.
Gentlelady from Texas.
Thank you very much. I rise to support the en bloc amendment, and particularly my amendment dealing with post-traumatic stress disorder. My amendment sends the clear and resounding message that we take all wounds endured by our veterans seriously. Although our wounds may be invisible, we recognize that they should be properly treated. One of the best ways to increase the treatment of post-traumatic stress disorder is to access treatment and to increase treatment in a number of medical facilities, local and community facilities. I want to thank the chairman and the ranking member for accepting this amendment and recognizing the enormous burden that has come about through PTSD. According to the Defense Medical Epidemiology database, the number of hospitalizations and outpatient visits in which PTSD is the primary diagnosis between 2000 and 2009 was 5,307 hospitalizations, 578,120 outpatient visits. I rise today also in honor of my friend and our late colleague, Congressman John Murtha, who worked with me to establish a outsourcing clinic in the Houston area at the Riverside Hospital. What a difference it makes. If proper medical care is given, about 40% to 60% of people who develop PTSD can get better care. How many of us can even talk about this experience, short of our combat members or members who have experienced combat who are here in the United States Congress, but the average American who is not, does not know the trauma of experiencing danger every day, protecting yourselves and your comrades. They come home, they deserve not only our celebration of their return, but they deserve to be treated so that they can go on with their lives. Since October 2004, approximately 1.64 million U.S. troops have been deployed for Operation Enduring Freedom, as well as the OEF and OIF in Afghanistan and Iraq. Let's say to our soldiers, you are deserving of our care. Let us provide more access to care for post-traumatic stress disorder. I appreciate the support of the en bloc amendment. I yield back.
Gentleman from California.
Mr. Chairman, I yield 1 minute to my friend and colleague, the Chairman of the Oversight and Investigation Subcommittee, the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Whitman.
Gentleman from Virginia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise to speak in favor of the en bloc amendment, specifically Amendment 124, introduced by my colleague, Mr. Moran from Virginia. I think it is absolutely critical that this get passed. Mr. Moran knows the potential problems with the new BRAC facility there in Alexandria if we don't limit the number of parking spaces there. He knows clearly that there are a number of challenges that, if we don't address in a timely fashion, are going to create unacceptable traffic problems in the region. We've worked with the governor, we've worked with the Congress to make sure that resources are flowing in a proper way, but to make sure that we have a breather by which to put in the infrastructure to make sure that the traffic can efficiently get in and out of that facility. If we're going to be creating bigger problems in what we're trying to solve with this, then we are not going to be doing what's in the best interest of the public. Limiting the spaces there to 1,000 gives us that breathing space, as well as making sure that the federal government and the state government put in the necessary traffic infrastructure improvements there to make sure we can accommodate that traffic and make sure we aren't interfering with what's happening elsewhere. So, again, I urge my colleagues to support the amendment.
Gentleman from Washington.
Thank you. I yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Rhode Island, Mr. Langevin.
Gentleman from Rhode Island. Without objection.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. Mr. Speaker, my amendment would basically ensure that the total cut to the National Defense Education Program doesn't come from its K-12 education program, which links DoD scientists and engineers with students and teachers in the science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, or STEM fields. We know that our nation is woefully behind in these subject matters, and if we don't engage future generations to excel in these fields, it will hurt both our capability for innovation and our national security. Now, NDEP supports national competitions to create locally based, content-rich environments and robust learning opportunities for students and teachers with an understanding of the real-world application of the STEM fields. Just last year, 1,750 DoD scientists and engineers from 48 DoD laboratories in 26 states engaged more than 180,000 students and 8,000 teachers in outreach and informal education initiatives. So, Mr. Speaker, I believe that we absolutely have to make an investment in these STEM programs, and I encourage my colleagues to support this amendment. And I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman from California, Mr. McKeon.
I yield 1 minute to my friend and colleague, the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Kinzinger.
Gentleman from Illinois.
Yeah, I thank the chairman for yielding. I rise today in support of amendment number 114, a few flight suit. while the intentions are definitely good, at a time when we find ourselves in fiscal strains and finding ways to spend money most efficiently, I believe this isn't it. So as an Air Force pilot, somebody that wears the current flight suit, I believe, and I've talked to many of my colleagues in the military as I currently serve, that believe the current flight suit works just fine. It serves the purpose of that it was designed for, and in fact it does a very good job. So again, when we're looking at ways to have efficiencies and ways to spend our money most wisely, I ask that you adopt amendment number 114, which would stop this $99 million redesign of the flight suit worn by only a few thousand people. And thank you, and I thank the chairman, and yield back.
Gentleman from Washington.
Thank you. I yield 1 minute to the gentlelady from California, Ms.
Gentlelady from California.
Lee.
Thank you very much. First, let me thank Chairman McCann and also our ranking member Smith for agreeing to include my amendment in this